This is Due South on WUNC News. I'm Jeff Tiberii. A contentious committee vote on Capitol Hill, and Senator Thom Tillis says his yes vote to confirm is contingent upon a meeting with Epstein victims.
I expect that meeting to occur before I'm willing to vote out of this committee. And I'm trying to get to yes, but this is a very important part of getting to yes. There should not be any reason why, based on what Mr. Blanche said yesterday, if he said that he would do it today, then he can certainly do it over the next 2 weeks.
We'll discuss on our North Carolina Friday News Roundup, and we'll also get an update on drought conditions.
Storms over the past week brought local improvements. 10% of counties moved out of the extreme drought category and into a lower classification.
Due South Friday News Roundup begins after the news. From the studios of WUNC News in Chapel Hill, it is Due South, high noon on a Friday. Glad to have you along for our North Carolina Friday News Roundup. Plenty happening from Capitol Hill to the state legislature and plenty of other points across the Old North State. We'll tell you about some of the topics and introduce you to our panelists in just one moment. First, some sounds of the week.
State health plan leaders say they need to raise premiums 5% to help revenue keep pace with costs.
Attorney General Jeff Jackson argues the company, which owns Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp, actively worked to get teens hooked on the social media platforms. The trial is scheduled to begin next month.
There are more than 200 confirmed cases in North Carolina of a severe stomach bug caused by a parasite.
As one of the state's poorest school districts, Halifax County hasn't had enough funding to make needed repairs and renovations to Hollister and other older schools.
The Drought Management Advisory Council says this week should be treated with cautious optimism.
And I'm trying to get to yes, but this is a very important part of getting to yes. There should not be any reason why, based on what Mr. Blanche said yesterday, if he said that he would do it today, then he can certainly do it over the next 2 weeks.
We'll get to a little bit more of what outgoing Republican U.S. Senator Thom Tillis had to say this week during a contentious confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill. With us for the hour are Colin Campbell, Capitol Bureau Chief at WUNC News, also host of the WUNC Politics Podcast. Claudia Rivera Cotto is political reporter at Enlace Latino NC. Bryan Anderson is statewide politics reporter for the Assembly, also creator of the Anderson Alerts newsletter. And Danielle Battaglia is congressional impact reporter at the News and Observer, as well as the Charlotte Observer. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having us.
Love your questions as well. You can send them in, questions or thoughts if you've got them, due south at WUNC.org. All right, let's begin in Washington, where on Wednesday, Todd Blanche, acting U.S. Attorney General, faced a Senate confirmation hearing, unsurprisingly contentious, as I noted. A key vote rests with Thom Tillis, the lame duck Republican senior senator from our state. Danielle, how is Tillis navigating the controversy of Blanche?
It's very interesting to watch him on this one. I've gotten a lot of questions about his maneuvering on it. I felt like I was the only reporter who heard him say he was impressed by Todd Blanche and that he helped with the Federal Reserve Chairman's Jerome Powell's investigation to disappear. And going into it, it sounded like everyone thought that Senator Tillis was going to be very much against Todd Blanche. He comes into the hearing. He rails on Democrats about being having situational ethics because they didn't push back when President Biden's administration went after President Trump and got him 88 charges. That feels like a bad way to word that, but he was pushing back on that. He was pushing back on the pardons that President Biden had passed and saying, why didn't you guys fight that? And now we're here with Trump and they're pushing back, or he was pushing back, saying he's also not happy with the pardons of the January 6th committee, or the defendants,
the rioters, sure.
And that they weren't happy with the 1776 fund that we've talked about on the show that gives people who feel they've been politically prosecuted restitution in a fund that's $1.776 billion. But he came out of this hearing and he was like, I'm not fully a yes. And he goes into a meeting Thursday, and he says basically that he wants Todd Blanche to meet with the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein before he'll vote for him. So there's like a lot of stacked layers on this.
Well, you say stacked layers. Forgive me, but I'm going to say it almost felt like Thom Tillis was naming the cars in the parking lot, and then it was like, no, let's center right here on this confirmation hearing and the issues that, up or down on Blanche. But Blanche is Blanche. Blanche, I don't think, has all that much to do with some of the happenings of the past administration. Remind us where the divide is on Blanche and if Tillis has stated where he is on Blanche.
So what he has said is he's not come to a conclusive decision on Blanche. A lot of it was going to ride on whether Blanche met with the Epstein victims yesterday, which he did. What I haven't heard from Tillis yet is that the meeting did not go well between Blanche and the victims. Both of them have come out saying that it was kind of confrontational. They're not happy with the meeting. I don't know how that changes Tillis's opinion. Tillis is one that's been very anti the Trump pardons of the January 6th defendants. He's also very against the 1776 fund. He said that he doesn't blame Blanche for any of this. He blames his boss, which would be the president, or I guess it could be, his boss prior. But he's not blaming Blanche. So it's very confusing to actually follow this because I feel like Tillis has gone multiple directions. Yes.
A lot of misdirection. Any thoughts here? It's okay if there aren't.
Tillis, I guess, still trying to sort of walk that line of like, I'm not really going to criticize the president, but I'm going to criticize everybody else in the president's orbit.
Excuse me, I'm getting choked up on water and smoothie. But why? Like Thom Tillis is done. He's not running again. He doesn't need to kiss the ring. He has been plenty critical of the president at different points. Do we have a sense of why he's afraid to step out on this one?
He has said...
Or maybe not afraid, but unwilling to it.
Let me answer this two different ways. He has said in the past that it solves no purposes to go after the president. That's the guy you don't want to make mad, right? So if you want to stay in his good graces and get things accomplished, you stay in line with the president. You can blame his advisors all you want. You have seen him start to fray away from that a little bit, where he is willing to put some of the blame at the president's feet for the things he doesn't like. On the other hand, I think you have to go back to that Jerome Powell investigation that was dropped. And if Todd Blanche helped him defeat that, Tillis is one that's pretty loyal. Like he's going to be happy that you got work done for him. He's going to see you as effective. He's going to, lift you up a little bit. So I don't know how that plays out with the things that he's not happy with from the Attorney General's office, but we'll see.
Friday News Roundup, due south, WUNC News. Meanwhile, in the race to replace Tillis, whose term ends at the end of the year, major party candidates Roy Cooper, the Democrat, and Michael Whatley, the Republican, traversed the campaign trail in recent days with what, Colin, notable or noteworthy or just happenings that we're going to talk about?
Yeah, the race is interesting this week because we saw some campaign finance stuff come out for the second quarter. So basically, April through the end of June, Roy Cooper's campaign took in about $15 million during that period. Whatley's campaign, by contrast, only $5 million, which are all key financial factors in this race. But remember, we're talking about a race where hundreds of $millions are expected to be spent by a variety of different groups, some of it dark money. So it matters to a degree, but it also is one piece of a very big puzzle of all the big money that's going into this race between now and November.
Do we run the risk, we in the news media, of overstating some of this, acknowledging that there are billionaires who can come in late? There are funds that the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats can kind of send and disperse and appropriate as they – I mean, you just said it, but there's a ton of money.
Yeah, I mean, there's fundraising to some extent is a sign of strength because it's how many people did you get to write you a direct check. But at the same time, there's so many other sources out there, and particularly with Michael Whatley having been the Republican National Committee chairman, he's got a lot of other sources he can tap to fund his campaign. So it's not like he's going to necessarily be outspent by the Cooper team.
Cooper, Whatley, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the Supreme Court just gave the National Republican Senatorial Committee, I hope I got that right, just like carte blanche ability to give money to candidates right now. And so I think that we're expecting to see a lot of money roll into North Carolina. They could have to put the money in other states, but, Michael Whatley is not a small name to Republicans. And so there's somebody that you want to keep that seat for Senator Tillis. You want to replace it with Michael Whatley if you're a Republican. So you might pump some money into the state. And now that you have full authority, why not?
And this week, I think it was one of his first big ad pushes. He had a sort of an introductory ad showing how he's been to 100 counties and put hundreds of thousands of miles on his car talking to people. So trying to sort of introduce his candidacy, even though he's obviously been running for quite some time and still doesn't have quite the name recognition that his team would like.
It's been on my YouTubes.
As a reminder, I believe that the path, and it's a fairly steep trajectory for Democrats to take back the upper chamber. They have to play defense everywhere. You got to defend all the seats, and then they have to flip 4. This would be one of the 4 that Democrats would almost certainly have to flip if they're going to get a majority in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, I was just going to say a couple notes on Colin's point of like Whatley visiting 100 counties. Whatley said he was going to conclude his tour in Spotsylvania, which is in northern Virginia.
There is
not
Transylvania,
County,
which is in western North Carolina.
But he did visit Transylvania. The other thing on campaign finance that's a little interesting is Whatley took in $350,000 from someone who was charged, not convicted, of soliciting prostitution. That was a Florida billionaire named John Childs, and there was $350,000 taken in from Childs. The campaign noted the charges were dropped ultimately. And then Whatley went on a show with Sean Spicer and said he expects $600 million to be coming into this race. And we got Cooper's reaction at an event in Graham earlier. And Cooper was just like, yeah, it's unconscionable how much outside spending is, kind of blaming the recent Supreme Court decisions. But at the grassroots level, Cooper has, like Colin said, tripled the fundraising of Whatley. And Cooper has $27.4 million cash compared to Whatley's $7.8. So Whatley is going to be very heavily reliant on these outside groups. And the question is, does Maine become a distraction? Does Texas take greater priority? And does that risk leaving Whatley behind?
Because Republicans can afford to lose North Carolina and keep their Senate majority.
Correct.
Democrats just can't necessarily find a path if Roy Cooper loses to get the seats that they need most likely.
Real quick, let's see if I can spit out this question fast enough because we're coming up on a break. There are resources that are finite. Money is finite, even though it feels at times like there's maybe billions in this U.S. Senate cauldron. As we think about Texas and Maine, any indicators yet as to how the national orgs are looking at North Carolina, if they're going full throttle or if they're pulling out?
It's really hard to tell at this stage, I think.
They call me a lot, but I haven't seen them actually focus in on North Carolina yet.
Yeah, the latest fundraising reports are through June. November's far away, so I think we're going to see a lot more money in the coming months.
Friday News Roundup on Due South. We're just getting started with Colin, Bryan, and Danielle. Claudia Rivera Cotto is here as well. You'll hear her voice in about 2 minutes. This is Due South on listener-supported WUNC News. Welcome back to the Friday News Roundup on Due South. I'm Jeff Tiberii. 89 years ago this week, the first Krispy Kreme location opened in Winston-Salem. Prior to Krispy Kreme, donut stores were uncommon in the South. Imagine that. And according to the UNC library, often thought of as, Yankee treats. Oh my. Krispy Kreme founder Vernon Rudolph landed on Winston, at the time the second largest city in the state, in no small part due to Winston's tobacco industry. Rudolph purchased a secret recipe from a New Orleans French chef for yeast-raised donuts. The very first Krispy Kreme was actually in Paducah, Kentucky. Then, on July 13, 1937, Rudolph opened a store on South Main Street in Old Salem. Today, there are Krispy Kreme stores in 36 countries worldwide. And what do you know? In 2003, before opening stores in Australia, the company gave away 300,000 donuts as part of their publicity campaign. Are y'all, I'm not a big donut guy per se, but Krispy Kreme, of course, a North Carolina staple. Are y'all fans of Krispy Kreme?
Yes. We sold them too much at my youth group to make money for my youth group that the smell now gets to me, but they're good. They're good.
Yeah, I like the regular ones.
I'll eat them, but I think of all the donuts, the sugar to like actual dough ratio in Krispy Kreme is a little heavy on the sugar and glaze.
Yeah, I was just going to say on Krispy Kreme, please stop offering like 99-cent dozen donuts if you buy a full at regular price. Like, I'm tired of seeing those emails. Just offer a discount off of the first dozen and then you got me in. But then for the donut connoisseurs, Baker's Dozen in the Triangle, NC Jelly in Alamance County, that's where it's to go.
Even Duck Donuts is a chain now, but it's still also North Carolina.
Mail.
Krispy Kreme is going to be calling us today, I'm sure.
I don't know about hate mail, but I will navigate back to that page and remind listeners that if they have questions or comments or hate for us, you can send it to dewsouth@WUNC.org. We are chatting with Colin, Bryan, Danielle and Claudia. I promise she's here. And we'll turn to Claudia Rivera Cotto now. We'll bridge another one of these Washington stories to North Carolina. The latest killings by federal ICE agents in Texas and Maine earlier this month have drawn renewed outrage and at least one vigil here in the Triangle in Durham. It was last Sunday. Claudia, if you would, tell us about this memorial.
Yes. So dozens of people gathered in Durham to mourn Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, who was shot and killed by ICE earlier this month. Essentially, the vigil was a moment where different members from the Latino community, but also people that are allies, were there to call on actions against what they described as a rising anti-immigrant violence. And a vigil happened here in Durham that Sunday. The day after, it was when the ICE agents shot and killed another man. This time it was in Maine. Mm-hmm. His name's Joan Sebastian Duran Guerrero, a Colombian national. And essentially, I think the feeling from the community is that these killings have been just showing how the immigration enforcement has become more violent. And in North Carolina, I guess in the Triangle, we haven't really seen in the past weeks that much of ICE enforcement. But in Charlotte, there has been more ICE enforcement throughout at least the end of June.
Right.
So during that same day that the vigil was held in Durham, there was also a vigil held in Charlotte. And the community is just essentially calling out the violence that's happening during the arrests by ICE.
Undeniably.
How many people attended the Durham one? Do we have a sense of that?
If I have a guess, I don't have the exact number. There were dozens of people there. I would say like about 30 people total.
These campaigns of intimidation and fear, we've seen them across the country here, unfortunately, going back a year, of course. And there are these renewed calls for accountability, some sort of independent investigation, review. We don't have very much in the way of details from Houston or rural Maine, do we?
Well, not yet. They're still in the investigation. Essentially, what we do know is that these two individuals were not the target of ICE. And we also have heard from the family members of both of these individuals, and they have essentially said about like the work they were doing here in the United States. And one of them, at least, Joan Sebastian Duran Guerrero, his family said that he actually had work authorization to work in the United States. And I think what has happened, and at least what I read also from the New York Times, is that at the end of June, ICE was told to ramp up their efforts to at least 2,000 arrests a day. Mm-hmm. We had, during the Border Patrol operations that happened here in North Carolina, at that point, they were telling the officials to do about 3,000 a day of arrests. Then after we saw the two killings of the citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, they kind of like Minnesota. Lowered down on that. And now at the end of June, they just ramped up back again those efforts.
This, of course, a national story. These are notes from outside of our state. At the same time, recently, a new bill has gone into effect here at the state. The bill number was S-153, but this was an immigration-related bill that gives new powers to the State Highway Patrol and other authorities, calling on them, requiring them to work with federal authorities. What implications or I guess fallout, what have we seen, if anything, in the state in the last few weeks because of this new state law?
So at least so far, we haven't gotten that many information from what has happened, but we do know that by October, the Highway Patrol and the other three agencies from the state need to give a report to the North Carolina General Assembly about what they have done. But essentially what this means to the community is that the Highway Patrol is being trained to collaborate with ICE with 287G agreements, so they can stop individuals under the suspicion that they're here without immigration documentation.
Sure. A story that will, I think, certainly continue. Will have both real-life impacts and also ruminations on the campaign trail as we head toward November. Speaking of November, we're going to transition to some election-related news now. Dallas Woodhouse stepped down from his job this week. Woodhouse is the former executive director of the state Republican Party. For whatever it's worth, that's the same position that Michael Whatley formerly held. More recently, Woodhouse has been working in the state auditor's office. Colin, why did he depart?
So this is follows several weeks in which Woodhouse's name was in the news around some of the drama that's taken place over early voting schedules in a number of counties across the state. We now have Republican majorities on every county election board and the state board of elections as a result of the auditor having responsibility for elections. Now the legislature moved that over from the governor's office, and so now you have these partisan splits on a lot of these elections boards where Democrats want to open sites in certain areas, Republicans would prefer sites in other areas, or fewer sites or fewer hours. And we've found out through a bunch of reporting from groups like Carolina Public Press and NC Local that Woodhouse, on behalf of State Auditor Dave Bullock, was reaching out to a lot of the Republican elections members to say where the auditor wanted the sites to be in different counties. And so this has created a lot of controversy at the local level of like, why are these people from Raleigh coming in and saying where our voting sites should be in Granville County or Jackson County or some of these other places around the state?
I'm not trying to carry too much water for Dallas Woodhouse, but like, is that really new? Like pressure from Raleigh? They want you to do certain things. Like, is this different than the norm?
I think the difference here is that when the governor was in charge, whether it was Pat McCrory or Roy Cooper, there wasn't a lot of meddling from the sort of appointment authority over the elections board. There may have been some from the parties for sure. I mean, every time you go through this early voting process, Republicans want locations and times that are favorable to Republican voters. Democrats want it that's favorable to Democratic voters. And so that's not new, but certainly the level of involvement from sort of the appointing authority. And this is not limited to Dallas Woodhouse. There's other staffers in Bullock's office who have done similar outreach. It's just Dallas who's the one who has resigned and said he wants to go back to more private sector work, that he always viewed this as sort of a short-term assignment to help go through the transition as Republicans and the auditor took over this particular oversight role. But certainly, this very much tied timing-wise to a lot of the early voting situations.
Bryan Anderson, a thought.
I think what we have seen in the past that Republicans would argue is similar, not equivalent, but similar, would be pressure from Cooper's administration, including Governor Josh Stein around the COVID era, to implement rules expanding like mail-in balloting. At the time, they called it a collusive settlement. And so they would argue, having the executive branch and executive statewide leaders, which Auditor Bullock is a Council of State statewide member, is similar to what happened in the past where, you have coordination and some back and forth between the state board of elections and statewide officials. What's different though this time is usually we would say like, oh, let's trust the local elections boards to hammer it out.
Yeah.
If they can't reach consensus, then it goes to the state board of elections, and that's where that conversation takes place. And what's different here is Bullock expressly, at the time he assigned Woodhouse to the elections liaison role, is said, this person's job, Dallas Woodhouse, is to coordinate plans with 100 county elections board chairs. Now, those are Republican board chairs. Those aren't state board, county board of elections, Democrats and Republicans. And so to me, I wasn't terribly surprised to see that coordination. Some people were like, how could they coordinate? It's like, well, that's what kind of the press release, what it said when this was formed. But what we saw that kind of was eye-opening was the magnitude to which Woodhouse would coordinate like media strategy of like,
here's a statement you can send to this news outlet that's asking you things.
And I think that's what kind of crossed the line in some people's minds. And what Woodhouse himself said in this 5-page resignation letter, one thing that stood out to me was one lesson this experience reinforced is that election administration is fundamentally local. So that was Woodhouse's kind of takeaway. Like, if I'm going to look back in hindsight, I think maybe we should learn that let's maybe let the local people have trust their judgment a little bit more.
Dallas Woodhouse seriously had a 5-page resignation letter.
Technically, it was 4 pages and like one line on the 5th page. But
Dallas Woodhouse is one of a kind. That fits the persona there. And I don't even mean that as like heavy shade, but that's just like only Dallas Woodhouse would have a 5-page
One of the top, most interesting, colorful figures of North Carolina politics over the last 20 years, probably.
Yeah, yes. I was going to say, I got like a note from him at like 9:50 p.m. or 10 o'clock on a Monday, and then we shared that resignation letter at that time. And If anyone wants to learn more about Dallas Woodhouse, I profiled him back in my days with the News and Observer. Just Google Dallas Woodhouse Oreo cookies, and I won't say anything more. You won't be
he's
disappointed.
well known for having a brother who's a big Democratic Party operative, and their mother having issues with their Thanksgiving dinner conversation being rather heated.
That was the weirdest Thanksgiving I ever had. Was
don't
at the
do it
Woodhouse
now,
house.
but at 1 o'clock, Google Woodhouse C-SPAN, and you'll have a funny moment between the Woodhouse brothers and their mother on national television. There's your tease. Bottom of the hour, Due South, Friday News Roundup. Let's work in our trivia question. Who is the only congressman representing North Carolina to ever serve as Speaker of the U.S. House? Send your replies to duesouth@WUNC.org. No. Hands going up in the room.
I have a trivia question I know, finally.
There are a couple of tricky answers. There are a couple. I think some folks out there are going to go, oh, I know it, but it might not be exactly who you think it is here. You can send your replies to duesouth@WUNC.org. Good luck. Again, that question. Who is the only congressman representing North Carolina to ever serve as Speaker of the U.S. House? All right, we've been talking about elections here. Meanwhile, Claudia, you were at the State Board of Elections meeting yesterday where new rules, I gather, were under consideration. What changes has the State Board made, or is the State Board of Elections pursuing?
Yes.
What are they doing?
So they did several rules yesterday. One of the changes that I think is worth noting is that now they will allow county election boards to reject provisional ballots over voter ID issues with a simple majority vote. In the past, that required an unanimous agreement. And now at the county election boards, we're seeing that their majority is Republican. So this is bringing some backlash from different organizations saying that it will become less of a bipartisan decision. And then another of the changes that also draw some backlash was that they approved new restrictions on amplified sound near polling places. This also keeps exceptions for accessibility or emergencies, but essentially people are saying that there are some events that happen in the polling locations that some members of the community, where it's be African American community, Latino communities, do to engage the voters, and this restrictions might limit those. So those were two of the decisions that were made. And just going a little bit back to what you were talking about, essentially, during the beginning of the meeting, the Democratic member of the North Carolina State Board meeting of election, Jeff Tiberii, he asked the board to do a subpoena of a former liaison, Dallas Woodhouse, and he urged them to do it because he says that the text messages that he was sending to limit Sunday early voting and on-campus voting sites is exceeding what he should have done. And the Republican member, Stacey for Eagers, he actually argued that Woodhouse, first, is no longer a state employee because he submitted his resignation. And then he also said that his communications were actually protected political speech. And Carmen said, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. It's like we're all raising our eyebrows because
in the room for folks who continue on a radio show.
No, so essentially Carmen said that he was going to talk to the chair at the end of the meeting to see if there's a possibility for Monday's meeting to have this subpoena as part of the voting.
I would just add to that, public records. If he is a state employee working with state auditor, every email and text message he's sent in that job is a public record. And many of the news organizations around this table may be requesting them.
Yeah, unfortunately, Dallas Woodhouse is not a state lawmaker. If he were, we wouldn't be able to find any of his records out.
Let me ask this question of y'all, current legislative reporters. As a former legislative reporter, it feels like there's just a whole lot of, my word here, tinkering with elections that's being pursued. Is this I'm out of the zone now. Is this what you've seen in recent election cycles, or are they ramping up maybe a flooding of the zone, if you will? Danielle? I
would say if you watched President Donald Trump's speech last night, that put a different perspective on things from me. And I do feel like if you look at the legislative laws that we have put into place, legislative laws is redundant, isn't it? There is the state legislative laws that we've put in place. Yeah. I feel like, yes, there is tampering. Tampering is probably not the right word either, but there is definitely a push to make changes to the election that I hope citizens are very much paying attention to. I'm not saying they're nefarious. I'm just saying pay attention.
Yeah, there's an election law bill that moved somewhat in the House fairly slowly, had a lot of protest, still active. It didn't pass by the end of the session, but they're not really done, so they can come back and do that. But this has been a trend since the last few cycles where election laws get changed with every election. This time it feels like a lot of it's individually minor. Yeah, they've done the big stuff. Now a lot of it's sort of the more minute stuff, but it all kind of adds up, and it's all recognizing that if we have another close election like the recent Supreme Court race that comes down to a few ballots, then those minute rules will matter a lot on who ends up coming out on top and which ballots can be challenged in a super close race.
You referenced the recent Supreme Court race from 2024 that took, I don't know, you tell me, 6 months to decide. 4 years before that, we had one that was separated by 400 votes. A few years before that, we had a governor's race that was separated by less than 11,000 votes. So part of the point here is, regardless of nefariousness, and I'm not taking that off the table, when you have really tight elections, little tinkers can make the ultimate difference.
Those are ultimately things that can provoke the legal challenges. If there's a landslide one way or the other, none of this matters. But if it's super close, it absolutely does.
I was just going to say, this was maybe the first budget I have seen that did not have election law changes in recent memory. So
we were watching for it.
It's not to say it won't happen between now and November. It's just to say the major changes haven't happened yet. What we're seeing right now is really at the administrative and procedural level, which is still important, but it's not the same. But that's in part because Republicans have already done a lot to get to this point that they've wanted to do.
Don't you all not have the full budget yet, too?
We do, yeah.
You do?
Yeah, but it's, there may be some things that are buried in there that we haven't seen. I try to not to claim I know for sure that something's not in the budget because I haven't necessarily read every line on every single page.
We are 109 days from November the 3rd. Perhaps more notably, we're just 7 weeks from the time that absentee ballots are supposed to go out. So election tinkering could continue here at the state level, but will need to happen in relatively short order. Hey, by the way, in case you missed it earlier this week, we spent much of the Wednesday Due South Hour discussing legislative non-happenings. Yes, not a misspeak. That's right. What did not happen at the North Carolina General Assembly this year and why? Colin, here today, is on double duty because he was with us on Wednesday, along with our colleague Adam Wagner. They offered the details and analysis. You can learn more about what the legislature didn't do by listening and downloading our Wednesday Due South program. Colin Campbell's here, so too are Bryan Anderson, Danielle Battaglia, and Claudia Rivera Cotto. Due South, North Carolina Friday News Roundup rolls along in just a moment here on listener-supported WUNC. Welcome back to listener-supported WUNC News. It's Due South Friday News Roundup. Jerry Moore turns 87 years young tomorrow. Moore was the football coach at Appalachian State University for 24 seasons, during which time the Mountaineers made 18 playoff appearances. App State plays at The Rock. Now, official elevation in Boone is 3,333 feet above sea level. Threes are wild. So it's fitting that Moore's Mountaineers won 3 straight national titles from 2005 until 2007. A statue of the coach sits outside the stadium. Happy early birthday, Coach Jerry Moore. We'll stick with sports for a moment, only because somebody had some really strong words to say here during the break. FIFA World Cup
Emphasis
final.
on during the break.
During the break. Well, I'm not going to say who it was. They can divulge that if they want. FIFA World Cup final, Sunday, 3 p.m. We've got Spain opposite Argentina. Argentina trying to run it back. Last nation to do that, I believe, was Brazil 30 years ago. Do y'all care? This is not a North Carolina story. It's just like it's a story of the world. So I just want to check in. Do you care? Will you watch? Do you care about Spain versus Argentina? I'm thinking you might not care, but I don't.
Ever since I had to wear shin guards as a kid, that annoyed the heck out of me. Okay. I have long given up on soccer, so...
That is...
This has been an awesome
If
World
we're
Cup.
talking about soccer in America, we should
entertaining.
also talk about women's soccer, not men's soccer.
That's a niche complaint, though. Like, it's the shin guards that did it for you.
It's the shin guards, the
They
traumatic,
are uncomfortable.
traumatic life of a 6-year-old.
I'm going to go wildly off script here, but I do think it's funny. So I have a nephew who is 13 now. He's a very good soccer player, and I've seen him play a couple times. He lives in South Carolina. And Gabriel, he has literally these shin guards that you would expect to see on like a doll. Like they might be 3 inches. And like I saw them on the coffee table at my in-law's cousin's house. And I was like, what are those? He's like, oh, those are my shin guards. Like these wouldn't cover like my middle finger. I was like, what are you going to do with those? And he's like, we just have to wear shin guards. He hates shin guards too, but he's a soccer player. I was like, that's
they have like fake ones so that you
Yes.
can meet the requirement
So
but
you
not
just
actually guard your
It
shins.
protects
in
the
your-
bone. Just one.
Yeah.
It
See,
doesn't
my other
protect
beef
that
is just
much
like
of
the
it.
flopping, the complaining. I'm like,
Listen,
you don't see that in women's soccer. I respect women's soccer. The men
That
got to
is
get
fair.
their.
You do see
either
it-
improve your acting
You do
or
see it in
stop.
you see it in the NBA,
flops.
which I am also a fan of. But no, I wish they could do it with the flopping. Anyway, World Cup, 3 p.m. Sunday. It should be a good finale. North Carolina is doing away with its vehicle registration cards and stickers. Why?
Yes, so this was in the budget, actually. They are starting to not require the vehicle registration to be printed out and the stickers. So essentially, the DMV must maintain a secure electronic system to enforce that people are actually getting the renewal and vehicle inspection. That is still required, but you just don't have to have the printed version of the registration.
Can I ask a question?
You may. That's the idea of why we're here. Let's ask some questions.
The Commonwealth of Virginia, when I lived there, lost my registration in the mail, and they told me if I got pulled over, I could still get a ticket despite being registered because I didn't have the card in my car. So if I drive into Virginia and I'm a North Carolina resident and I don't have a card, what happens?
That is a good point. I actually wrote that on my article as well.
Very good question.
We're suggesting people to actually have their registration in hand in case they're traveling, because there is supposed to be an interstate vehicle registration database, but not every state is.
The
having
DMV
it.
told me it's up to the cop whether he wants to count my electronic vehicle registration as registered or if it's in my car or not. So I don't trust this.
So if
Pulled
you
over, do you just say
But-
license and
No,
license?
but
If you
importantly,
wanna print it out-
are you supposed to print it out yourself?
So
Or-
if you want to print it out yourself,
Yeah.
you don't have to, but you can do it.
Okay.
And essentially, they're still figuring out how much that's going to cost. I think there's going to be a fee on that.
Interesting. I was once pulled over a long time ago now.
Wait, a fee to not print something
A
out?
fee to print it out.
Oh,
if you want it. Yes.
I don't think this
If not,
is
you don't gotta do
still
anything.
the law, but maybe one of you can round it out for me. I was once pulled over. We're going back like 17, 18 years now for making an illegal turn. I did not come to a complete stop on a red light. It was my
Bad.
fault. I dealt with it. But I was pulled over, and the officer, I gave him the registration card, and he said, you know that I could arrest you right now. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And he goes, you have not signed your registration card.
Wow.
You're supposed to sign it?
For some reason, I think that has changed.
Okay.
But I've been very diligent about signing my
Now you do it all
registration
the time.
card for the years
Well, I'm going to go sign it.
that ever
Well,
came
actually,
since.
until October, you should probably keep your registration and your sticker on because this is going to become effective October 1st, 2026.
All right. Due South Friday. You have a thought? No, you didn't have a thought.
No, I'm
Due
good.
South Friday News Roundup. Let's do some news briefs before I take my victory lap on the trivia question. North Carolina congressional, and please jump in here if there are any contextual nuggets that y'all have here. North Carolina congressional Democrats were split on a vote that would have halted aid funding to Israel. Deborah Ross and Valerie Fouché were in favor of an amendment to end $3.3 billion in aid. Alma Adams and Don Davis did not cast a vote. Just one Republican in the entire U.S. House, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who introduced the amendment, was in support of it. On the Democratic side, it was roughly a 50-50 split as the amendment failed. Mount Airy is the latest North Carolina community to enact a moratorium on data centers. On Thursday, the local Board of Commissioners unanimously approved a 60-day pause. According to member station WFTD, Commissioner Chad Hutchins described the decision as a practical step as leaders navigate rapid growth within the industry. Meanwhile, down the road in Davidson County, commissioners directed staff to draft a 6-month moratorium for its county. North Carolina's lawsuit against Meta appears to be heading to trial next month. In a suit, along with 29 other states, North Carolina alleges that Meta made its platforms addictive to children and misled the public about them being safe for younger users. State officials said Meta had sought to have the case dismissed on summary judgment, but a U.S. District Court judge has denied Meta's motion. And a North Carolina road, at least part of it, could soon be getting a new name. It's a secondary name, I guess. North Carolina 16 in Gaston County will have the name of a former 2-decade Congress member. Danielle, who and why?
It would be Patrick McHenry, who is he was interim Speaker of the House.
He was interim Speaker
of the House. And he had a long career in North Carolina politics. He started... Where did he start? At the State House?
I believe he started as the State House as a pretty young representative, like in his 20s.
Yeah, he was in his 20s in Congress. He's kind of Madison Cawthorny in that way. He started really young and then worked...
I'm sure that's a comparison you want to make. But
well, I mean, if you actually...
From an age standpoint.
Being named after you.
The funny thing is, if you look at his early years, like he was also a flamethrower, and people will talk about that, but he got serious in his...
Grew up a little bit.
His ascension.
Yeah. And, when the country needed him most, he rose to the occasion. He could have taken absolute power as Speaker. They were giving it to him, and he turned it down and, said he was going to take another term, but retired, and now he's doing his thing up in D.C.,
As a lobbyist or as an advisor. I mean, I'm sure he's making a comfortable salary, and it's less stress, one would hope.
Working with banking, cybersecurity, Kalshi. He's a Bloomberg correspondent, and he's on CNN like almost every other day at 4 o'clock.
Patrick McHenry, we'll get to trivia in a second, I swear. But let me just round this out. So the highway or the state road, North Carolina 16, this is happening, and when, and did he ask for it?
I don't know who asked for it. It's in the budget, and that passed, so it should be happening. And it goes from Charlotte through Gaston County up to Lincoln County, which is where he lives in Denver, North Carolina. And Denver is not in Colorado.
There's a Denver, there's a Minneapolis, North Carolina.
I believe, so he gets to, when he flies into the Charlotte airport and drives to his home in Denver, he gets to drive on the highway named after him.
That's cute. I hadn't thought about that. That would be fun.
I renamed my driveway after myself just 3 seconds ago, so I get to drive in on my driveway. All right, Due South, Friday News Roundup, WUNC News. It's July. It's mid-July. What do you want out of us? We're talking about McHenry road names. Here is the trivia question. One more time. We'll see if everyone who is so enthusiastic has it. The only congressman representing North Carolina to ever serve as Speaker of the U.S. House. Now, we just mentioned Patrick McHenry. He was the interim. He was not voted on by the body. He is not listed on the official record, the U.S. House history online. So that, unfortunately, is not the record
Sneaky. He has a painting.
looking for. I'm looking for someone. He has a painting.
He's got a painting on the speakers.
He's a painting. You sound like Wedding Crashers. There's a painting. I've done a painting, Todd. So, any guesses?
Do I get to guess for the mug?
Yeah. We're looking for.
So it's not McHenry. That was what I was so excited.
It's the 1800s guy.
It's got to be like. I feel like it's got to be a county name.
Well,
because there's 100 counties.
It is a county name.
And I feel like it's got to be some like Western North Carolina one.
So it's definitely not Cannon. He's the guy who was from North Carolina.
I'm going to go with...
And we don't have anything. I'm just going to give you...
I'm going to go with
mull
Macon.
it over. I'm going to make sure...
Is it Macon?
You pulled that out of your rear end.
I certainly didn't pull it out of the internet,
You know what?
I'm fighting fire with fire, my friend.
Colin's doing a fact check over there.
I don't see it on Brian's computer screen right now.
He was on his phone at one point.
He did.
It might have been in a different tab.
Okay, all right. The guest from our live studio audience is Randolph County. Brian Anderson does allude to the correct answer there, not on his own scruples, but the internet is a reliable source. Nathaniel Macon.
That's it.
I'm glad we're having fun with this
He's
one.
from 1800s, right?
He was
1801 to 1807, if my memory's right.
1801 to 1807, if
right.
Brian Anderson's Wi-Fi here at WNC News works correctly, was the Speaker of the U.S. House in the 7th, 8th, and 9th Congress. I figured that we would get some decent but not quite accurate guesses with McHenry. I figured someone would guess James K. Polk.
Terrible. I wrote about this.
There's a lot going through your head. There's a lot in the flood. The zone has been flooded. Yeah. I also figure someone might say James K. Polk because he was born in North Carolina. He went to UNC, but when he was Speaker of the House, he was representing Tennessee.
Well, and I got the hate mail on Cannon because he was also born in North Carolina, and there's a building named after them. And people are like, the
Cannon office building.
Yeah, they're like, you need to remember him. And I was like, he wasn't representing North Carolina.
Nathaniel Macon is the answer. I thought we might have somebody who would do that one. But,
did we get any 10 people email in and say McHenry?
We got it sounds like there were a few people who emailed in and said McHenry, and it's a reasonable answer.
He gets to keep the
just
title.
Not the one I was looking for. He was interim speaker. He was speaker for what, 28 days, 32 days, 22 days?
I think it was 22.
Okay. All right, we've got a few more moments for maybe something substantive, definitely substantive here on the roundup. Notable development in Midtown Raleigh. Claudia, you wrote recently that promises of affordable housing as part of a 28-acre construction expansion have effectively evaporated. Also that these expansion plans are leading to the displacement of an immigrant enclave. Let's start with the affordable housing. What was originally in the works and why did it dissipate?
Yes, so I did this story in collaboration with Chantal alum from the News and Observer, and essentially there is an apartment complex right now that is called the Midpoint at Midtown, and that area was usually named by the Latino community as Los Navajo because there's hundreds of families that are from the Latino community that live there. The cost to live there is relatively affordable. From $900 to $1,300, which is really not that common in Raleigh and mostly in the Midtown area.
Rents, yeah.
But now, Kane Realty, they have plans to buy the land and essentially create new apartments, retails, and hotels in that zone. So the residents have been given more than a year notice to leave the property, but essentially they're currently in what it's called a move out, in the leases expiring in phases. So the community is just right now looking into where they're going to move, if there's any apartment complexes that really are affordable in the region. That's like not likely. So some of them had told me that they're just moving farther away from the Raleigh Center.
You're a Raleigh renter. This doesn't exist. Is there any sort of compensation and or help that...
Is this the North Hills development just sort of expanding into...
Yes, exactly. So Kane Realty actually has some development in the North Hills area. So if you are at the Pointy at Midtown, those apartment complex right now, you basically see those affordable apartments. And in the background, you will see the high towers of the North Hills. And it's a very stark contrast, honestly.
One quick note, and then we're going to roundtable it and hear from you all on something that's on the horizon. But next week on Due South, Lauren Collins joins the program. She is a Wilmington native and author of a new book titled They Stole a City. It's all about the 1898 Wilmington Massacre, which is the only successful coup d'etat in American history. She writes about the lead up to the massacre and also the impacts of the Wilmington Massacre that extend, believe it or not, to present day. We spoke this morning. Fascinating conversation. You can tune in on Wednesday to hear Lauren Collins talking about her new book. All right. Let's get something that is on the horizon for you, either something you're tracking you can tell us about or something you expect to be in the news here in the next week. Bryan Anderson from the Assembly.
So I'm going to say there have been a few people on social media who have been saying, well, why didn't we cover when Governor Cooper was not allowing conservative media outlets to attend his press briefings? I just want to give a few fact checks. The Assembly did not exist at the time of the COVID pandemic, and also it was widely covered by my former colleague Colin Campbell at the time. So we have covered that issue, and my current employer didn't exist.
Yeah, hard to not cover something when you don't exist.
Claudia Rivera Cotto, what is on your docket for the next week?
Essentially, I'll just be covering the community impact on what we were talking about earlier about ICE. I think that's a very important topic. And then also, I just wanted to go back to the question you just made. I think I did not answer it. The community named Los Navajos at Midpoint, they're not getting any compensation. And essentially, there are some organizations that are working to figure out if there are any ways they can get compensation from the county. So maybe the county board could make some decision on that, but so far they haven't really gotten anything.
Danielle Battaglia with McClatchy.
Congress is making the rare move to try to get a budget together prior to the August recess, which I don't think will happen, but we'll see. They have hope. But also with the speech last night, the president wants the SAVE Act passed. It must be passed. I think they're going to end up going home.
And Colin Campbell.
Well, starting to gear up for, believe it or not, the legislature coming back on July 27th. So not quite next week, but they'll be perhaps thinking about what they do or not do. Would we get action on the last diversity, equity, and inclusion ban veto override? Do we get action on that hemp regulations bill? Maybe we'll learn some answers in the next week or so.
All right. Big thanks to Colin, Bryan, Claudia, and Danielle. You can find more Due South offerings at WUNC.org/Due South or wherever you do that on-demand listening. This is Due South, a production of WUNC and a broadcast service of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Our producers are Stacia Brown, Cole Del Charco, and Rachel McCarthy. Rachel Hernandez is our intern. Big thanks to Al Wodarski and Ivan Penarewski today, filling in for Denarius Thomas. Our executive producer is Aaron Keever. Theme music comes from Quilla. My name is Jeff Tiberii for Leonid Inge, and everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you again Monday at noon. Adios.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious, because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. Follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.